Hey everybody, it's Susan with Susan Monroe Art, and today I'm going to show you a really basic skill that you have to know if you're going to be a successful watercolor artist, and that is how to stretch your watercolor paper. I'm sure many of you have painted things, and then when you're done, your paper will be warped and wrinkly, wavy. It's a real bummer, and the way to solve that problem is to use real watercolor paper, not copy paper or mixed media paper, and to stretch it by soaking it in water before you paint. In stretching it, you will achieve a perfectly smooth surface for your painting, and it is a great technique. The way I'm going to show you how to do it is the way that I learned how to do it, and it is not using gummed tape. I have not had great luck using gum tape, and also gum tape is messy and sticky, and I don't like to deal with that. Instead, I use my handy dandy stapler when I stretch my watercolor paper. It's quick, it's easy, it's clean, and I think you'll really enjoy seeing how it works, and I hope that you're going to try it after you see this tutorial. So thank you for watching. I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel. I really hope you'll give this video a thumbs up, and then you can click the bell icon if you want to see more watercolor videos when I put them out. And also you can always leave a comment. The more comments you leave, the more YouTube is likely to pick up on my video and more people will see it, and I'll get to tell more people about the fun of watercolor painting. Thanks so much for watching, and now let's get going stretching watercolor paper. To stretch your watercolor paper using this method, you are going to need four things. You're going to need a stapler, and it needs to be a stapler that can open up flat like this. You're also going to want it to be full of staples. You don't want to run out of staples in the middle of doing this. You're also going to want a really thick piece of foam core. This is called gator board or gator foam. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it on all sorts of art shops. It lasts forever. I've had some of my big pieces of gator board for 25 years, I'm sure, and they've been stapled in multiple times. I don't know if you can see all the staple marks on this one, and I have yet to have it wear out. So you're going to want some gator board. It's, like I said, super thick foam core board. You don't want to use the thinner ones because as your watercolor paper dries, it tightens up like a drum head, and the thinner foam core boards will bend, will warp with the strength of the paper. So you're going to want a piece of foam core, and I'm linking this gator board in the description underneath, so you'll see a place where you can purchase it if you want to make that investment. I highly suggest it. I paint everything on gator board, and I love it. And then, of course, you're going to want your watercolor paper, and of course this piece of gator board is not big enough. I've got a bigger one I'm going to use. You're going to want your watercolor paper because that's what you're going to be stretching. You're also going to need water, of course. I use my bathtub, or you can use a soaked rag if you want to do it that way. So let's get going, and I'll stretch this watercolor paper. So welcome to the place where I stretch my watercolor paper, which is my bathroom. You're going to want your bathtub, and I also have a big beach towel spread out on the floor, ready to get some of the extra water off my paper as soon as I'm through stretching it. I've got my tub sealed up. You don't want to be running the water while the paper is in there necessarily, just because you don't want the running water hitting the paper, and that can just push more water into certain areas of the paper than others and make it a little uneven in how it soaks. So I'm going to start running the cold water, and once I get, an inch or two in there, I'll stop and I'll show you the next step. Okay, I've got my tub full of cold water, and now I'm just going to put my paper in the water and let it take a bath for a while. What is happening is that my paper is soaking up this water, and it's removing all the sizing that is on the paper. Just like when you buy new clothes, they have sizing on them to make them stiff and not wrinkle and things. Watercolor paper also has sizing in it. you're also softening the fibers and making them ready to receive your watercolors. Now, I don't leave it in here for an exceptionally long period of time. I just want it to be flexible. I just want it to be a little floppy, to feel a little softer. And after 30 seconds, a minute, I go ahead and I take it out, and then I'm going to blot off the excess water on my beach towel. Now you can see there are puddles of water on here. I'm just going to take my towel and gently just dab off that excess water. And I go ahead and do it on both sides. You see my paper is super floppy now, and I'm going to go ahead and staple it on to my gator board. So here I have my big piece of gator board. I'm going to lay my wet watercolor paper on top of it. You want to move quickly during this part. You don't have to go crazy, but the paper is going to start drying quickly, and it will start bubbling and warping like wet paper does. So you want to get it stapled down before it really starts to dry. I always start with the four corners, and I like to staple very close to the edge. I'm going to flip it, four corners, and then I do the middles of each side. And then I just sort of start dividing each section into half again. So half, half. In between these two, half here, in between. Same over here. And your paper is going to start bubbling up while you're doing this. It's going to start warping on the edge. Don't worry. Just keep stapling away. Sometimes I'll just try to staple down the bigger bubbles in the center of those. This paper is not warping too much. I'm going to go ahead and fill in these center areas now. I like my staples to be maybe an inch apart. Great. And now I want to leave it flat to dry. Occasionally I used to prop it up like this and then put it in front of a fan, trying to make it dry more quickly. But what happens then is the water tends to run and collect on the bottom of the paper and makes it dry unevenly, which I found did make a little bit of warping on my paper. So now I just keep it flat. I have a ceiling fan. I just keep it in the middle of my room and let it dry naturally. You can always use a hair dryer if you need to speed up your drying time. The problem with that is that sometimes when you use a hair dryer, you'll just dry the front side and the back won't be dry yet. So your paper might feel dry to the touch, but it's not. So you really want to make sure it's completely dry. I wait overnight, usually at least several hours, and you can tell when it's totally dry when you feel it with your back of your hand and it's not cool. It'll just be room temperature warm. You'll be able to tell the difference. Now, say you live somewhere where you don't have a big bathtub where you can lay out your paper. I've had that experience, of course, and what I've done in those situations is sort of reverse the process. I staple down my paper on the board, then I will soak it with just a damp rag, clean rag, and even let the paper sort of sit in puddles on the top. I just want to make sure the whole thing is covered and is soaking through. You could even, dampen it, I guess, and then staple it down, more similar to what I've done with soaking it in the tub, but this is the way I've done it. I've stapled it down and then soaked it, and it's worked very well. Also, say you were stapling it down and it starts to dry, or you dries and then you realize, oh, I've done something wrong here and it's warping. Excuse me, it's warping. Well, then you can always do this and sort of restretch it, and it will dry flatter. So it's a really forgiving process. And I really like this method because, I mean, these staples are not going anywhere. They're not pulling out. I don't have to worry that it's not going to stick. I can then add tape afterwards, which I usually do. So it's sort of belts and suspenders, but I don't add gum tape. I'll just add some masking tape, mainly to make my painting have sharp edges, and I tape right over the staples. Okay, so you've stretched your paper, you've painted your painting. This is a painting I did recently of the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. And now you're done and you're ready to remove it from your gator board. Well, first thing I do is I'm going to take off my masking tape, which is so satisfying. I love seeing these nice sharp edges. And then what I use to remove the staples is, actually, it's an old letter opener that I got as a high school graduation gift. It works great. It's not so sharp it's going to cut my paper. If you don't have a high school graduation gift to remove your staples, you can always use a palette knife or a letter opener, something that's got a very thin but not sharp blade. You don't want to risk cutting into your paper. And I always remove the staples by pushing my my letter opener away from the painting. I don't want to go this way and accidentally somehow dig into the painting when I'm removing the staples. And sometimes my paintings come right up to the edge. I don't worry about it too much with this one, but just a good habit to get into. So I just dig under each staple and remove it. I also don't use a regular like office staple remover because I find that those tear up the paper, and I like to keep my paper looking nice. All right, I sort of collect the staples under my finger as I get them, and then after I've collected a certain number, they could start scratching the painting just from the way I'm doing this. So make sure you set your staples to the side if your staples are starting to touch your artwork. Or you can just do like that, move them one at a time. There we go. My gator board is as good as new, ready for the next project. And my painting is perfectly flat and dry. I haven't had to deal with scraping off extra gum from a gummed tape or anything like that. It's very clean and simple. And then I generally like to go to my paper cutter and I'll trim off the staple holes. So that's why I like to put them right by the edge of the paper, because I'm going to be trimming that off and I don't want to trim off any more than I have to. So let's go do that right now. And there you have it. You could have a nicely finished, perfectly flat piece of watercolor paper with your finished painting on it. No ridges, no bubbling, no wrinkling. And then I've trimmed the edges to be nice and even if it's going to be framed. I always like to do that. And your piece is ready to hang, or ready to give to your client, or just ready for you to enjoy. I hope you've enjoyed learning how to stretch watercolor paper using the stapler method. I hope that you'll try this method. Like I said, I've been doing it for years and years and years, and I love it. I think it's great. As I said before, there will be a link in the description down below that links you to the gator board that I use to staple this to, just in case you're interested in doing that. Or maybe you have another idea that's just as good or better for stretching your paper or for stapling onto if you use this method. And I hope you'll share that in the comments. So I want to say thank you for watching. I hope you'll give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to know more about watercolor techniques and see some more watercolor tutorials. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.